For 5 seconds. Colburn shoots, deflected, score! The Flyers tie it with 2.8 seconds remaining. Excellent for them. So the Penguins have had leads of 2-0. 3-1. Now Couturier ties it at 5. Sean Couturier with his second goal of the night.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And it is Isaiah. We are back, brought to you by FlyersTodayGritty.com. It is the O&B Puckcast episode number 197. And we are recording at an unusual time. It is the day after the Flyers' fantastic performance against New Jersey Devils in North Jersey last night. Actually, a cluster F is the only way to describe it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're not going to overreact. We want to talk about what this training camp has been like so far, the big bag states and all that good stuff. We got some rumors we want to go through. We'll talk about what this roster looks like and how it eventually will shape up. Tonight, we have a great guest. Chef can't make it because of our odd recording time, but we do have with us the great Dan Silver. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. Even
Fantastic.
Despite that wonderful effort last night from the Orange and Black.
Boy, that was something. Yes, our guest today from thefourthperiod.com, Brotherly Pod, regular on TSN, just mentioned by Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts. He is Anthony DiMarco.
Hey guys, what's going on? Good to be back from summer. Tried to ease into it, but kind of got put into overdrive a bit here as we started a training camp with obviously more to discuss about the Flyers than maybe we once thought going back a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a late breaker. Carson Bjarnason, their second round draft pick. He's headed back to the WHL, but not before he gets signed to a 3-year entry-level deal by the Flyers. He must have shown enough in his short time with training camp and before that with the rookie camp that the Flyers feel confident that he's part of their future. Dan, any quick comments?
No, he was probably, I would say, maybe in that 3 to 5 tier in terms of the 3rd to 5th best goalies that look like they were being drafted. But goalies are completely hard to predict, right? He looked really good early in the season, then he started struggling. And so the Flyers have a really deep pool of goalies. And Bjarnason and Zavragin, the 2 guys they drafted this year, are both going to add to it. So we'll just kind of see how they develop. Hopefully Bjarnason works out better than the last guy that the Flyers had from Brandon Wheat Kings.
Yeah. So last night, the Flyers opened the exhibition season, really get wiped off the ice by the Devils 6-0. It was 4-0 before you could even blink. Calder Peterson was in net, kind of doing like a I don't know. It looked like he had Steve Sachs or Steve Blass syndrome. Like he didn't even know how to play the position. He didn't have any help in front of him. And the talking points or narrative, Anthony, is that, after the hard skate and all those scrimmages in such a short span of time to go right and play, even a Devil split squad, it was a lot to ask them to come up and look any better than they did.
Yeah, no, of course. Like we know how John Tortorella operates in training camps, and he ran them into the ground, clearly even alluded to by Ian LaPerriere, as you just mentioned. And you pretty much have your third and fourth string goalies in a lot of way. Like even if Sam Urson starts in the AHL just in the interest of him getting more playing time, I think we could agree that Peterson and Sandstrom, whichever way you want to rank them, are probably your third and fourth best goalies in your system right now. So you have those two goalies between the pipes. I thought the forward group I didn't watch the game, but I'm just basing it off the roster, was not bad in terms of name value, but the defense, that even when you're going to have a full defense and an NHL ready defense, like that's going to be the Achilles heel of this team. And, earlier today I mentioned that I think, we're going to see the difference of Ivan Provorov not being there. And as much as he wasn't a number one or maybe not even a number two on this team, he did plug a massive hole. And we're coming into this season with no clear-cut replacement for him. You kind of have Cam York, Ristolainen, Travis Sanheim as your 1, 2, 3. And then after that, it's a crapshoot. Like, who knows who's going to be in the top four? I imagine at this juncture, it's Mark Stahl. Is Andre going to make the jump? Who's going to be sitting outside? Who's going to be on the outside looking in on that third pair with Igor Zamula, Nick Seeler, and Matt Walker? Sean Walker. There's so many Walkers. Matt Walker was the guy they got for Simon Gagne. Right. So Sean Walker, all kind of vying for those spots. So even with like a full lineup on the back end, that's going to be their Achilles heel this year, because it wasn't particularly strong last year. And now you're coming back without D'Angelo and without Ivan Provorov. So I'm not surprised that they gave up as many goals as they did, given their defense as a whole and given the two goalies that were playing, in addition to the fatigue.
Yeah, they should just have a wheel that they can spin after most of the games this year with an excuse that they come up with. So the excuse here was that, again, it was the first preseason game. No one really cares. But yes, the excuse they immediately came out with was that Tortorella skated them really hard. So, okay. But Anthony makes a good point. And, I think both of us made the point after they traded him. A lot of Flyers fans kind of had Provorov as a whipping boy. And, our defense is going to be better without him. Like, they don't have anyone right now that you can just put out there to eat minutes like Ivan Provorov did. And he was the best defenseman on the team. I mean, different guys played better at different periods, but you watch the first 10 minutes of that game last night, and it was a catastrophe in their own zone. Again, it's the first preseason game. No one really cares. But it was a split squad for the Devils. Like, they only had half of their NHL players. So it's not like they were being eviscerated by Jack Hughes. It was because he wasn't even playing in the game. It was other guys. So, it is what it is. It's going to be a long season. Cal Peterson certainly didn't look that great. No one really stood out to me watching the game. I did watch the game. I had the Eagles on the big screen, and I had the Flyers game on my iPad. There just no one really did much of note. So hopefully, they can shake off the tired legs. And of course, the other storyline was Cam Atkinson not playing. They're saying it's a lower body issue, not an upper body. Obviously, last year he missed the entire season with the upper body injury. So hopefully that, doesn't develop into something that lasts a while. But obviously, Flyers fans are a little bit gun shy when it comes to guys with injury issues.
Yeah, I think that, with Cam Atkinson, like you pointed out, he didn't play last year. So the first thing that pops into my mind, okay, it wasn't his neck. They talked about it being a lower body issue. And you could use the phrase, I don't know if they've used it yet, but I'm sure we'll hear it at some point if it doesn't get better soon, the so-called interest of the abundance of caution. But the first thing that comes to my mind, he hasn't played in a year. He skates real hard, has to get ready for that, has all those scrimmages. And do we have a groin pull on our hands? So it's a rebuilding year, but we have our antenna up for that. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Couturier makes it through the game. Yay. That's a good thing. And I think Felix Sandstrom looked somewhat like an NHL goaltender. Beyond that, there wasn't really, I mean, there were a couple of players that didn't totally suck. And that was it. I mean, is that what we're dealing with?
And I think probably Felix Sandstrom's the guy who has arguably the most to lose out of a lot. Well, certainly out of the goaltenders, in my opinion. And you can make the case among everyone in camp because he's up against Sam Ersson. And I guess Cal Peterson, you could say that, but I think Cal Peterson has a one-way ticket to Lehigh in whatever capacity. And he probably is the backup in Lehigh because, well, I mean, I guess the one scenario I could see maybe Peterson starting in Lehigh is if Sandstrom gets claimed on waivers, and then Ersson is your backup. Because I know Sandstrom, like, let's be honest here, like, even people I've spoken with the organization, like, his ceiling is just like a good backup goalie in the NHL. He's never going to be a starter. We get that. But I mean, I still think there's a value to having a guy like Felix Sandstrom in your system, you know, as opposed to going out to get, you know, the second go around of Ray Emery or Michael Neuwirth or Brian Elliott or Martin Jones, any of the goalies that they picked up over the years going back to the Hextall era. So, I mean, I think that given where they are, it helps to have a guy like Sandstrom there. Obviously, he's been durable for this team going back to last season, especially important given Carter Hart's, you know, injury troubles going back to probably since the beginning of his career, to be honest. So I think it was nice to see Sandstrom have a decent showing, even if it wasn't in just like a half game capacity.
No, I agree. I mean, any positives from last night? Matt Brown had some moments. Joel Farabee. Morgan Frost had a particularly bad game with the puck. But even Couturier threw away the puck. And there's going to be timing issues with a player who's been off for almost two years. Was it like 20 months or 22 months, something crazy? So it's going to happen.
Morgan Frost is a guy who you mentioned was not great with the puck. I mean, again, I've heard different things from various people. You know, we talked about it on the last show I was on where we were discussing how long the contract was going to take. And I was saying, well, I thought it might take a little while because I think that maybe Danny Briere has one feeling towards him and maybe John Tortorella and Keith Jones feel a different way towards Morgan Frost. Of course, the deal got done right after our show, so 2 years. But I still think that if he plays the way he did last night, where he was sort of being careless with the puck, there's going to be big problems with him this year with Tortorella because the GM's really gone to bat for him, you know, in my opinion. And this is going to be a big year for Morgan Frost, especially with a guy like Cutter Gauthier going to be joining the team for next year. And you've already got Couturier and Noah Cates. So Frost is going to have to be better than he was last night. Obviously, you could say that about every guy. It was the first preseason game. But you would still expect a guy like him that's probably has a lot to prove, or at least you would think that he would, not making some of the careless plays that he made with the puck last night. So something to pay attention to as the preseason games go on.
Yeah. Anthony?
Yeah, well, if you look at this forward group right now, like last year was about figuring out what you had with a lot of these forwards, and you did. Now, look, there still are some questions, like can Farabee bounce back after a down season after he had the neck surgery in the summer of 2022? Could Wade Allison and or Tanner Lazinski solidify themselves as NHLers? But I mean, you kind of know what you have in Noah Cates, more or less. You kind of know what you have in Owen Tippett, more or less. Tyson Forster, obviously, but he's cutting his teeth and he's not on the same path as those guys once were. But as opposed to forwards who were on the team last year and are still on it this year, the only guy that has a lot of uncertainty around him, in my opinion, is Morgan Frost. And John Tortorella said in his media availability on Sunday, I believe, he said if he's going to be in the lineup, he has to be a top 6 player. And I feel like Morgan Frost has the next 2 years to figure out what he is, because there is a path here for Morgan Frost. It's a very unlikely path, but it's a path to be the number 1 center for this team for a long time, if not the number 2. Because, okay, yeah, Cutter Gauthier is coming, but we still don't know if he's going to be a center at the NHL level. Aside from Elliot Denwyer, I don't think they have any NHLer at the pro level right now, or any player at the pro level right now that projects to have an NHL ceiling. Noah Cates, I still think, is going to be like a very, very good 3C. Sean Couturier, I mean, like, we're not going to count on him to be a 1C anymore. If he just settles in as a really good 2C for the rest of his career, I think that's like a good thing based on everything he's gone through the last 22 months. So Morgan Frost has a very nice path here. And I've spoken to people with the team that, yeah, Danny, you're right. There are some people who, and I think John Tortorella is one of them, that have some gripes with Morgan Frost, but there's other people who still feel like he's a developing player and still think that he has the opportunity to be a point producer for this team for a long time. Now, maybe that comes from Danny Briere. We've obviously heard that he is a proponent of Morgan Frost, but even aside from that, like, even if you're not a fan of Morgan Frost, you got to look at the entire team objectively and be like, man, he still makes the most sense to be your top line centerman in a lot of respects. Sean Couturier, when he wasn't with a Claude Giroux or Jake Voracek, what was he? A 65-point centerman, like, more or less. Noah Cates, I don't think, is ever going to be a massive point producer. And unless Cutter Gauthier blossoms into a number 1C and takes maybe like the path of a Pierre-Luc Dubois and shifts to the middle relatively flawlessly, I don't know if they still have a number 1 center in their pipeline. For as many good prospects as they have, they're predominantly on the wing, and then maybe now they have some on defense with Andre and Bonk, and certainly in net. So I think if you're Morgan Frost, and I think his biggest hurdles through his career have been between the ears and his consistency, if you can just look at your surroundings and look at the situation you're in, you should be able to tell yourself and get yourself to a level where, you know what, I have the chance to be a top 6 center on this team for the next 5 years, because frankly, there's no one nipping at my heels right now. And there's no one who plays down the middle of the ice that possesses his skill set.
I don't know if Anthony, you were on the show when we were talking about this before, when we were talking about who this was a show maybe a couple of months ago. And Isaiah asked who's the number 1C on the Flyers. I don't know if it was you who was on the show and said thought it was going to be Morgan Frost. And I can't see him on this team with Tortorella here as anything more than the 3C. And that's still my opinion. And I've been as big of a Morgan Frost fan as anyone. I think Bill Meltzer has now probably taken over the mantle of number 1 Morgan Frost fan. But look, I was getting pillared on Twitter for years by various people for overrating Morgan Frost. So I have been a big fan of his. I respectfully disagree. I just don't think that the way that this franchise is set up, I don't think that he's going to ever be a 1C. Like, I don't think he's going to be the guy that they're going to put out there with the game on the line. Like, especially from the defensive standpoint, like a guy that the coach is going to have confidence in, when I think of a 1C, I think of a guy who's out there if you're protecting a lead or if you need a goal. I just don't think he's going to be that guy here. And he should be, Anthony's right. He should be looking at it as, this is his opportunity, right? I don't think, and I agree that there's a dearth of center prospects on the team. If you want to say that Gauthier is going to end up as a winger, but looking into my crystal ball, I just don't think Frost is going to be a top 2 center on this team moving forward. And I'll be moderately surprised if he's here past his current contract. I hope he goes out there this year and has a monster year and sort of proves the people wrong,
Yeah. And just to not get misconstrued, I'm with you. I don't think that's what's going to happen, because I think in a lot of respects, John Tortorella has made up his mind. And I think maybe Frost is here. Like, and again, this is just me speculating. Like, I'm not reporting this, but maybe Danny Briere and some of the guys in management were just like, look, we have no one else to play this role right now, so why not trot him out there again and give him another chance? Like, if it's not Morgan Frost getting all these opportunities down the middle of the ice, who's it going to be? Ryan Poehling, Elliot Desnoyers? Like, you're going to play Joel Farabee at center again? That's just the nature of it, that I think that I don't think he's going to be that, because I do think that between Tortorella, and I do think he struggles with confidence. I've heard that he battles confidence issues. But if you're the player, you should say, like, man, even if it's just because of circumstance, I have a wide open opportunity here based on my skill set and the lack of competition to lock down a second line center job here for a long time. And skill set wise, he probably should be aiming even higher than that at the first line. But I do think that in a lot of ways, the racetrack is running out. And certainly if Gauthier becomes a centerman, well, then I think then it's all but solidified for Morgan Frost.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the player that we all seek here may be coming up in this year's draft. I mean, that may be the real answer. But with Mishkov and Gauthier both flirting with the possibility of being centers, and obviously Gauthier to a greater extent, we'll see what happens. I think this draft will go a long way towards creating a direction for them. But Anthony, I just wanted to ask you, you're reporting on the Flyers and their negotiations or purported negotiations with the Ottawa Senators around Shane Pinto's contract situation, the possibility that they might have to move away from Mathieu Joseph as opposed to Kubalik and other players. Give us a recap or possibly even also the latest that you're hearing regarding that situation.
So going back to the Pinto stuff, and 32 Thoughts has really done a good job of breaking this down at length. But from my point of view is that they did table an offer to bring in Shane Pinto. And I believed it involved Pinto and Mathieu Joseph, and it involved a roster player going the other way. A lot of people have suggested it was Morgan Frost. I can't say whether or not that's true, but it was a roster player. So take that for what it's worth. The Senators don't want to move on from Shane Pinto. Elliot Friedman has said they really like the idea of a 1-2 center punch of Stützle, Norris, Pinto for the foreseeable future. Fine. That's a good philosophy to have. Build down the middle of your ice. But they have, I think, less than $200,000 in cap space. You handed out $5 million to Tarasenko this summer. You handed out $4 million to Korpisalo this summer. You handed out, I think it was $2 million to Dominic Kubalik this summer, or $2.5 million. And all of a sudden, you have no money to sign Shane Pinto. And you have Mathieu Joseph, who I do think is a good bottom sixer, but he has 3 years left on his contract at $50,000 under $3 million. And I believe he had 3 goals last year. And teams aren't going to line up to bail Ottawa out of a bad situation. The Flyers have said that we will take on Mathieu Joseph for the right price. I believe that the Ottawa Senators are trying to attach a second-round pick to Mathieu Joseph. That's some rumblings that I've heard. And the Flyers have respectfully said no, and they've told them what they want, and the Ottawa is yet to circle back. Now, if I'm the Flyers and you already have Garnet Hathaway and you already have Nick Delorier, I wouldn't take Mathieu Joseph for a second-round pick, because I think you already are stacked with not only overpaid, but just wingers in general, specifically bottom 6 wingers. And this isn't like a contract that's expiring this year, like the Canadians taking on Tanner Pearson. Like, you have this guy under contract till 2026. So you have to be very aware as to where this is going, right? How long he's going to be on your roster. So I reached out to other executives with other teams, and I got responses from several people that said it's going to take a first-round pick, a first-round pick equivalent, and then one person said it could take a second-round pick and a prospect to make it into like a first-round equivalent. Now, a lot of people, Dave Pagnotta included, have suggested that it's Tyler Boucher who the Flyers want. If it's Tyler Boucher, I would imagine it's Tyler Boucher in a second-round pick. I did speak to someone with the Flyers who said that they would certainly be opening to listening if it was the Detroit first-round pick that Ottawa holds right now. They do have 2 first-round picks. And I think the ball is in Ottawa's court at this juncture to meet the required price to dump the 3 years remaining on Mathieu Joseph's contract. And even at that, you're going to dump that money and then you're going to allocate pretty much all of it, surely the majority of it, to Shane Pinto, and then they're right up against it again. But I think from Ottawa's standpoint is that they haven't drafted in the first round since 2021. You kind of looked like a buffoon if you're Pierre Dorion when you made that trade for Alex DeBrincat just for him to walk out the door and demand a trade. You made a significant trade to bring in Jacob Chychrun, but I think that was a good deal. They needed a top 4 defenseman, and he certainly checks that box. But I think that as of right now, the Flyers are saying, hey, we're willing to take Mathieu Joseph. There's not a lot of teams in the NHL right now that are willing to take on Mathieu Joseph because of the term. Because even if you have like cap space right now, like let's say, I don't know, pick whatever team, that doesn't mean you're going to have $3 million of additional cap space next year or in 2 years from now. So it's a relatively hefty contract to just take on with nothing going back the other way. But I think the Flyers have said, this is our ask. Let us know if you're ready to meet the required price.
Are there other teams that have been rumored as to maybe, because obviously if the Flyers are the only team that like is interested in this potentially for picks, then obviously they're in the driver's seat. If there's another team that would maybe take a second round pick for, Joseph's salary, although I guess obviously that hasn't happened as of yet, but there are other teams that are sort of rumored to be involved in this.
Well, I don't think anyone's taken him for a second round pick. And I think that's what Pierre Dorion has realized. And that's why I reached out to two separate teams, one of which I could tell you would be one of the teams that would be like in a position to take on Mathieu Joseph. So I could tell you that much. And so even teams that can take it on, like a lot of people have suggested Chicago, some have suggested maybe the Ducks or the Coyotes or the Sharks, one of those teams. And I'm saying like, okay, like, yeah, you could take that on, but like even the Coyotes, even the San Jose Sharks, like they could take on Mathieu Joseph, but the Coyotes would then only have $1.6 million left in cap space. The Sharks would have less than $1 million left in cap space. And, a lot of teams want to keep roster spots open for dumps, and San Jose and Arizona are up against the roster limit right now. San Jose's at 47, Arizona's at 48. You look at the Ducks, who have the most cap space in the NHL, but they still need to give out contracts to Drysdale and Zegras. So once you give out those contracts, how much more cap space are they going to have? You look at Detroit Red Wings. They have $5 million in cap space, but they're a team with playoff aspirations. Do you want to eat up 60% of your remaining cap space on a bottom six player? It's just a tough spot that Pierre Dorion is in right now, that I look at a team and I would imagine Chicago's probably the team that's in the best position to do it. But even at that, like, do you want to commit 3 years to Mathieu Joseph? And forget about the salary, but it's even the roster spot. If you're a rebuilding team, do you want to commit that roster spot to a fourth liner? And even if you are, there's only so many spots that you're willing to commit. Like the Flyers have committed 2 fourth line roles to Hathaway and Delorier already for at least the next 2 seasons. So, I mean, it's not as easy. Like a lot of Ottawa fans, responded, and obviously they're upset and they're fans, and I get it. But it's just like, it's not as easy as just like, oh, well, just take Lassie Thompson and there, just dump Joseph. Like, it's not that easy because of the term. And it's not like the cap hit is nothing. Like, it's still almost $3 million.
I mean, is it possible? I mean, let me put it this way. Mathieu Joseph, what's his comp on the Flyers right now? Just out of curiosity, who's a player on the team that we would be familiar with on the Flyers that is comparable?
A comparable comp, like in terms of like the role that he would play?
Yeah, the kind of player he is.
I mean, he's a bot. I think he has good underlying numbers, if I'm not mistaken, but he only had 3 goals last year. So you have to take that into consideration. Like, I imagine but we haven't seen him play. I was going to say maybe like a Garnet Hathaway. Like maybe
a Brian Paling or a Hathaway is what I would say. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. Like a guy who is an ideal fourth liner, but could flirt with the third line if need be. That's kind of like
Hathaway. Yeah, Hathaway's kind of like that himself,
Yeah, so I would say he's pretty much like Hathaway. And you know what? If you didn't sign Garnet Hathaway here, maybe you're the Flyers and you're just like, you know what? We'll take him for a second round pick. Who cares? Whatever. Plop him on the fourth line. But you have Hathaway, who obviously brings that other side of intensity to his game, and then he could also break some faces along the way as well. And it's just like, if you bring in Mathieu Joseph, like you already are kind of in a position right now, based on some of the line combinations that we've seen, where Allison and Lazinski are on the outside looking in. Like we're already in that. Like we're assuming Atkinson's healthy. That's kind of like where we're at right now. Allison and Lazinski are not in the starting lineup. So Joseph comes in, and I do think he's better than a 13th forward. You're not sitting Delorier. Paling's a center, so he's not sitting. You just signed Hathaway, so they're not moving. I think that's actually going to be a fun fourth line, especially for a rebuilding team. And I think they'll probably be a good fourth line, even in puck possession and all shot differential. And then you look at the guys in the top 9. Is Mathieu Joseph going to unseat Tyson Forster? No way. Is he going to unseat Scott Lawton, the de facto captain? No way. And then you get into, okay, Owen Tippett. And then you quickly realize that there really is no spot for this guy. And then this is not even considering guys like Bobby Brink and Elliot Denway and Ollie Licksell. So it's not advantageous from a roster standpoint for the Flyers to take on Mathieu Joseph in any way. So it would literally have to be an overpay from Ottawa for the Flyers to take on Mathieu Joseph. And again, it's not just this year. It's not just next. It's the next 3 seasons that you're going to have to be dealing with Mathieu Joseph.
To me, it sounds like a scenario where if it ever gets done, it would take a third team. I mean, it would be worth it for a first-round draft pick because we're lamenting that the Flyers don't have a first-line center. Well, you need number 1 picks to try and take as many picks at the lottery with that. But this seems like it would need a third team involved. I mean, they did it with Provorov, but the scale of this is not where teams are willing to. I don't know. Maybe this is where a guy like Lazinski or Allison could be peddled off because they like Mathieu Joseph and his pedigree going through the Tampa system and knowing that he knows the right way to play, then that could be a rationale. But still, that would make him a 13th forward on your roster for 3 years. So,
and Elliot Friedman had said that they do like the player. I'm sure he would work well with John Tortorella. And if Ottawa were willing to meet the Flyers' demands, this deal would already be done. So this is in Ottawa's court. It's just that their sale just went through with the new owner, Michael Andlauer. And the first move under the new ownership of Pierre Dorion is going to be paying a first-round pick to dump Mathieu Joseph, a guy who I believe you signed less than a year ago to this extension, only because you have to sign Shane Pinto. And I was talking to someone else where they said, like, you're essentially paying a first-round pick to sign your third-line center. It's no slight on Shane Pinto, but when you think about it like that, it is kind of crazy. And Ottawa is a team with a lot of pressure to make the playoffs, and they have some ammunition here and in some draft capital to add to this team theoretically at the trade deadline to try and push you into the playoffs. Like, they're in a very competitive division. Aside from the Montreal Canadiens, all the teams in the Atlantic have playoff aspirations. So are you going to are you going to part with a first round pick just to sign your 3C? But at the same time, if you start the season without Shane Pinto because you can't afford him, do you have any chance of staying in the playoff race? And that's been Ottawa's problem in the last few years. I think they went like 6-12-1 to start last season or something. So they're in a really bad spot here, especially with the new owner looking over Pierre Dorion's shoulder.
Shane Pinto, though, he's 22 years old. He's basically a first-round pick. He was taken at the beginning of the second round. Yeah. He could end up being like a legit NHL second-line center. He's on a trajectory where he's a pretty good player. So I get what you're saying, but Pinto's a good player, I think.
Dude, he's a very good player. I'm talking about the optics, because the optics for Ottawa, I think from the DeBrincat situation, it really was rough for them. Because you bring in this guy who's supposed to, last summer was the summer of Pierre, where you bring in Giroux, you bring in DeBrincat, you lock up all these guys to, very good contracts like Stützle and Norris and Batherson, and now they just signed Jake Sanderson. Like, I think Ottawa's in a good spot in many respects with what they've done in drafting and getting this nucleus all committed for the foreseeable future. But it's more like at a certain point, you have to take that and turn it into tangible success. And I think that a lot of the optics of Pierre Dorion the last 12 plus months have been making moves kind of out of desperation. And I don't know if the Chychrun deal could be looked at like that. Like, I think that was maybe more Arizona, who just said, you know what, F it, we're just going to get what we can. But it just feels like a lot of his moves recently have just been throwing draft capital at a situation to, plug a hole. And look, Shane Pinto is a great hole to plug. Like you said, I think he's going to be a hell of a player, but it's all because of self-inflicted wounds. Like, this was all because you prioritized signing Dominic Kubalik and Vladimir Tarasenko before signing Shane Pinto. And I think that's why you got to look at this and be like, man, like, is he really going to pay a first-round pick because of self-inflicted wounds? Like, did they need to give $5 million to Tarasenko? And even the Korpisalo stuff, like, look, they need a goalie. And in the grand scheme of things, $4 million for Korpisalo probably isn't a bad contract. But he only had to make that deal because he traded Philip Gustafson for Cam Talbot last summer. And Philip Gustafson's turned into a hell of a goalie in Minnesota. So it's just a lot of the optics coming out of Ottawa that, like, they have all this foundation that they've built that looks really good, but there's been a lot of self-inflicted wounds preventing it from getting it over the top and over the hill.
Well, I mean, after a couple of years of Fletcher, I mean, backing himself into a corner, it's not unfamiliar to us that a GM has to make those kind of moves. And even, you know, with what went down with Kevin Hayes to St. Louis. So, Dan, I know you're kind of you're tight on the clock here, so I wanted to give you some response time there.
I don't have anything more to say on this situation. It'll be interesting to see how it proceeds. I don't know if there was, I get to chime in.
Just maybe about the, you know, who's going to maybe surprise that's going to make the team, or maybe another guy who won't make the team. My early dark horse on that is Tyson Foerster not making the team.
I think Forster's probably going to make the team. I mean, obviously that's you'd be getting good odds on him not making the team if you were going to put a bet down in Vegas. I don't know how many surprises there are going to be. I mean, Emile Andre has kind of been up and down so far, but I think everyone on the defense core has been up and down. I mean, ultimately for me, I just think that Andre is a better hockey player than both Egor Zamula and Ronnie Attard and really anyone else that's going to be sort of a young guy competing for a spot on the team. And you see flashes of what he can do. I mean, he's got a high compete level. He's probably got, him and York probably have the best first passes out of the zone of any of the D-men on the team. You know, I don't know if he's going to make the team or not. He was a little up and down in the preseason game yesterday, but I just see Andre as being almost too talented not to make this team if they are purely going to go based on, you know, who can help the team this year, because to me, he's one of the best 4 defensemen on the team right now. So, you know, he's the guy who I think has a very good chance of making the team, who might be on the borderline right now.
Yeah, I mean, Tortorella said we're not going to block hits, and he talked about Stahl being kind of like a part-time coach and missing some games, because that's part of what their agreement is. So that gives us hope for those who want to see guys like Helge Grans, or more to the point, Emile Andre, because I think Grans needs more seasoning. And but yeah,
Grans too is a guy that I'm not a huge fan of. But the fact that they're looking hard at having Travis Sanheim play the right side, where he says he's more comfortable, would certainly make it more likely that Andre could make the team on the left side.
Yeah, there's definitely an eye towards that. Okay. All right, Dan, thanks for checking in. We're going to continue
always
with
good
Anthony.
to see you. Always great to be on with Anthony. Have a good rest of the day, guys.
Yeah, man. Right. Have a good one.
Thanks, man.
Okay.
So, Anthony, I mean, that begs a question. I did bring that up. I didn't do that for shock value. I have not been impressed so far with what Tyson Foerster has shown out there. I'm sure he could pick it up, or they might be grading on a curve based on what happened last year. But he seems to be kind of like waiting in position to receive a pass to get a shot, and he's not that guy with that juice out there. Maybe he's just squeezing his stick a little bit, because I know he worked hard and stayed in this summer, and the competition with like Allison or Lisinski aren't the kind of guys that the organization is holding in high regard right now.
Like Lisinski, forget about, but like just a quick one for you before you dive into Foerster. Like, do you think Allison, the clock's like it's done with him? Like the clock has struck midnight with Wade Allison?
Practically, if they're playing them, they might be showcasing him.
Yeah.
I think they feel really good about Tyson Foerster, except I don't think, and this is a lot like York, because you have two scenarios. You have a situation, Noah Cates comes in, hey, kid, if you play the way we think you can, you got a spot, go grab it. And it worked out. You had Cam York, same deal, couldn't grab it. The situations were different. He misunderstood the coach or what have you. With Cam York, he was afraid to make a mistake. With Tyson Forster, I think it's the same scenario, and I'm not seeing him cash in on that. So, but I do think Allison and Luzinski are basically out of here. But I think Allison has value that Luzinski does not.
Yeah, I do think Allison, and when the Flyers were still a team 2 years ago, like when Chuck Fletcher swung for the fences and brought in Ellis and Atkinson and Ristolainen and all that, and you still had Giroux and Couturier, and they were still a team looking to win. Allison had value as like a younger, hungrier guy to come in on your third or fourth line and plug those holes, like on a cheaper contract. But now that the script is flipped and the Flyers have all the depth guys you could want, kind of setting the tone in terms of work ethic with like Hathaway and Delorier and guys like Noah Cates and Scott Lawton, you're looking for guys who can come in and be top sixers for the foreseeable future. And I don't think Allison has that, especially when you consider the plethora of right wings they have. Owen Tippett's moved to the left side to kind of make room for it. So in terms of Tyson Forster, I do think it is kind of very indicative of where they want him to work on or what they want him to work on, that he's with Noah Cates and Scott Lawton, two of the hardest workers on the team, obviously two John Tortorella favorites. So I think for maybe they hope that some of their work ethic rubs off on Tyson Forster. I just think that he may get a longer leash or grade on a curve, to your point, because he brings a dynamic that no one else does. And I think that's also what has kept Morgan Frost getting more and more chances, is that, I mean, let's shift it back to Forster here, is that with the exception of Owen Tippett, there's nobody who really brings that shot and that like nose for the net and that killer instinct in terms of beating the goalie clean like Tyson Forster. Now, I think that he's probably going to cap at like a second liner on like, that's like his absolute ceiling because he isn't much of a play driver. But I do think that they see some value in what he brings that others don't. And there is a path for him, in my opinion. But I mean, like you said, the competition isn't too stark. I mean, I guess Bobby Brink, he's kind of had an up and down camp as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He's been more or less a non-entity. You see a flash here or there. You see his speed or lack of speed being a little bit of a factor. And what he's tended to do is he's tended to drift out on the periphery and then kind of try to reemerge with an open look. But he has to get closer to the net. So that's not really working out for him. I think the time he lost, and he's still playing a little bit of catch up, he could definitely be a call up, but I don't think he's making the team out of camp. Again, he could turn it around, but I think these slate of games starting tomorrow with the Islanders are going to be important for guys, even guys like Forster. I mean, I hear you. I mean, who like the question would be, okay, who's going to take the spot? Well, I think when you think about Tortorella, though, he doesn't want to hand a spot to a kid who didn't earn it. And I think that will override pretty much everything, particularly for a player they have high hopes for. So,
he'll play. If Tyson Forster doesn't own it, like, and people would lose their mind, but you could bet your ass that like you would see a Rhett Gardner or a Cooper Marody playing in that spot. Like, we saw that last season with Zach McEwen playing at times, who actually had a pretty good season. But like we saw that a lot with the forwards last year, where like Lazinski was battling with, who was the Jackson Cates was battling as well. Delorier was always a staple, but like we saw a lot of young guys battling with each other. Alexel came up. There were still some hangover veterans, but aside from that Forster spot, there's no real battle going on here.
No, Lixell could be that guy. If Lixell clearly outplays Forster and Torts is like, I mean, if I got to go with Murray, let's start out with Lixell. let's get Forster to like wake the hell up, and that could happen. I'm not saying Forster's not going to be here this season. I'm just saying with what I've seen so far, even in like rookie camp and last night, I'm like, ain't happening yet. You know,
He could
that's
be
all.
this year's Cam York, where it takes him a few months to go back down, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
Dan kind of touched on the defense and Emile Andre. Like, that's where I'm looking, because I feel like there's 3 spots more or less up for grabs. And I spoke about earlier today that a guy like Igor Zamula, and I haven't heard this. This is just me kind of like my own thoughts. Is like it feels that like he's viewed in the same vein closer to a Nick Seeler than he is to like an Emile Andre. Like, I don't know if they feel that he's like, they need to get him playing time, because let's be honest, what's his ceiling? A left shot version of Justin Braun, a number 5? Like,
Probably.
yeah, that's
You know what? I think there's 2 guys. I just popped in my mind. You know that GIF where you got the guy looking back at the girl that walked by.
yeah,
You know that one.
yeah,
He's with the girl, and then he's looking at the other girl that just walked by. I mean, that's what like he's with Zamula, but then Andre just walked by, and I think
yeah,
Andre kind of trumps Zamula. And Zamula's got the size, but he hasn't been able to hold up physically.
yeah.
And a lot of the promise and the hockey IQ, which they're both very similar. It just looks like Andre has a smoother transition because he doesn't have the linkage problems with the height and the weight the way Zamula does. In spite of all of Zamula's promise, it looks like Andre is on a quicker path to get there. Zamula looks like a guy who won't be good till he's like 26 or 27. And he's like 23 right now. It's going to take more time. And by then he's out of the organization. The Flyers have moved on, But
and they have no, like, they are not missing left shot D who could peak
No.
at that. And like, just to say, like, I know that again he probably has a Robert Hagg type ceiling, but like Adam Ginning looks like he could maybe be that stay at home all defense left shot D on your third pair. Like,
they like him. They like him.
yes, so they like him. So I mean, and in the meantime, you have Nick Seeler, you have Mark Stahl. Like, I think a lot is going to depend here on Emile Andre. Like, if Emile Andre like takes a job and he's like on the second pair with Travis Sanheim to start the year, I think we see Igor Zamula on waivers. Like, and then you have Sean Walker on the third pair with Mark Stahl and Nick Seeler, and those 3 just kind of rotating around. That's how I kind of see it shaking out. And if Emile Andre starts the season in the AHL, maybe playing with Helgi Grans, then, I mean, you maybe see Igor Zamula get some games. But even at that, we know John Tortorella loves Nick Seeler. I think Mark Stahl is probably going to be on your second pair for as long as Andre isn't. Because out of Zamula and Seeler and Walker, I think they like Stahl the most. Like, you're not going to see like Zamula or Seeler play on the second pair with Sanheim, are you?
Zamula could sneak on there in a pinch, but not Seeler. I don't see that at all.
So I think you're going to, if it's not Andre, I would imagine it's going to be Mark Stahl playing with Sanheim. Like, the only set pair we kind of have right now is York and Risto. I think that's the only one that we could take to the bank.
I think, but they change it like goalies change pads. With if it goes bad, it's going to go bad because they're not ideally matched pairs. They're going to try and establish these pairs like you're saying, but I don't know. But yeah, I mean, just logically, you have to start somewhere. I would think that that's what you're talking about. York and Risto, Sanheim and Stahl, and then
Zamula,
you could see Andre
Walker
in a third pair.
See, if Andre makes the team for me, I would like to see him with Sanheim on the second pair. I would like to see it. And then you have Stahl and Walker. Something like that. Like,
Could they move on from Seeler?
Sealer's your seventh. Yeah, Sealer's your seventh. Like, Jennings, I think, is starting in the A. I meant like more for the future.
Okay.
So if in this situation where Andre makes the team, I think that you see a Stahl Sealer rotation as your number 6. Walker, I think Walker should play because I think he's better than those other two, and I think he's someone that could get you a decent draft pick at the deadline, especially.
Yeah,
as
you
a
don't
right
want him
shot.
on the sideline, hemorrhaging any kind of value.
Yeah, so I think Walker should play. So assuming Andre makes the team, Andre's in your top 4 with Sanheim. I think Sanheim at this point should just he's kind of peaked. We know what Travis Sanheim is. I think he's just a very a solid second pair defenseman. I think he should be a good partner for a young Emile Andre. And then you have Stahl and Sealer rotate with what's his face, Walker. And then Zamula, assuming he clears, could go to the AHL and play with Helgi Grans. I think your top pair with the Phantoms is probably destined to be Mete and Ronnie Attard. It seems like that's where it's going.
Yeah, there's a lot of names. And it wouldn't shock me if Mete impress them, that he's got some NHL pedigree. I don't know. I don't think there's going to be any sacred cows here on defense. They want to see, if they default anywhere, they should default to the younger players. But Mete is he's 25. So it's just, he got pushed into the lineup probably sooner than he was ready, right?
Yeah, he was put on the top pair with Shea Weber, I believe, in 2016-17. I think it was Weber's first year with the Canadiens that they put him on that top pairing when they were assuming and hoping it to be Nathan Beaulieu. And they just put Mete, and look, Shea Weber dragged Mete along, and I think he was decent at the beginning, but I mean, he's bounced around so much. I think he was actually the 9th defenseman for Toronto last year. But I mean, I think the only thing that we could say about the defense with certainty is that you're going to have York, Risto, and Sanheim probably as your top 3 in terms of eating minutes.
Yep. No, that's fair. Definitely.
And then the goaltending, I guess, the battle for the backup job. I mean, I guess it could be Urson. I don't think it's going to be Peterson.
No.
Nor should it be. But I mean, look, you have the cap space. You're going to bury 1.2, I think it's 1.1 million of his $5 million, get that cap relief. I mean, once they get the cap relief of Ellis on LTIR and the additional $1 million of Cal Peterson, you're going to be working with about, over $8 million in cap space, which, I mean, you should be able to leverage at the trade deadline in some capacity, or hopefully.
I mean, that's part of what this year's all about. Trying to get milk as many assets from these clubs that are desperate. This year's not all about the playoffs. I'm not telling anybody something they don't already know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can come into this draft. You look at this draft and have 2 first-rounders right now, theirs and Florida's, that would tend to be kind of more to the mid or late 20s. Okay. Even with the injuries, Florida's going to be a good team, or good enough. They can get another 1 or 2. I mean, that's what they're aiming to do, I'm sure.
And look, I do think that there's an avenue to add more first-round picks. We know that they turned down first-round picks, or at least 1 first-round pick for Scott Lawton, which, I mean, I think you could certainly criticize that. I think Travis Konechny's value will probably only increase from here. I mean, in terms of expiring UFAs, Sealer and Stahl won't get you much. I think Walker could maybe bring you a Justin Braun type return from 2022, an additional 3rd round pick,
right,
of sorts.
That sounds right.
So I mean, you could, theoretically, assuming you don't trade any of the your bigger players like a Lawton or a Konechny, which obviously they aren't in a rush to do. Ryan Poehling, I mean, he's still only 24, so who knows with him? But I think assuming you're just dumping expiring contracts here, you should be able to add another mid-round pick or 2, and you already have 2 seconds, you already have 2 firsts. I think that they're in a good position here. And then if you do look to explore a Travis Konechny or a Scott Lawton type of trade, then you're really cooking with more of an Ivan Provorov-esque return. And it's crazy to think that for all that they're rebuilding, they've only really dealt 1 big name. They've only unloaded 1 guy in a significant capacity.
That's right. That's something they have a lot of cartridges in the chamber. And you got to pick the right time, though. And obviously, they're waiting probably for the trade deadline, unless some kind of big injury comes up with an opponent. I think we're going to leave it there, Anthony. Really great having you on and giving us that information about Ottawa and your opinions about what the roster is going to look like and who could come and who may end up in the AHL or elsewhere. So where can people find your work right now and what you got going on?
Yeah, so obviously, as always, A DiMarco25 on X. My work at thefourthperiod.com had a sit-down interview with Riley Armstrong last week. It was really cool, breaking down the Flyers player development program and the changes he's looking to make for it. Also looking to do more NHL stuff. Bill Guerin, had a chance to sit down with him a few weeks ago. Looking to do more with that, provide more league-wide content, and obviously my podcasts are very sporadic right now, so I'm not going to plug anything. Obviously, Brotherly Pod here and there, Stick to Hockey, hopefully coming back here from time to time, but nothing really set in stone. But every Wednesday on TSN 690 in Montreal as well. I was doing St. Louis radio over the summer. We're going to see if we could rekindle that as well. But yeah, slowly but surely trying to grow this thing, right?
Yep, you got it. Terrific. You can find me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _ 520 on X. I got to get used to that. And of course, the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck at O&B Puck. We're on roughly about a dozen podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, Google. We have our YouTube page. Just plug in there, O&B Puckcast. Check it out. Subscribe, rate us. It helps move us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And of course, we're also on the platform Getter, GETTR, at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. The Flyers play from this vantage point tomorrow night on the island against the Islanders, of course. In Boston on Friday, they're at home versus the Devils. That should be a fun rematch. They got 2 more contests. And then the season begins on, I believe it's the October the 12th. But we'll be back before then. So until next time, everybody, take care.